Freedom Decrypted is sponsored by Think Penguin and Liberty Minded. And you are listening to Freedom Decrypted. This is your host, Christopher Wade, and
Rich Paul.
So we have a new co-host today. Rich Paul is introduced. Rich Paul is our new co-host. For those who are watching, you can see he's sitting right next to me. And for those who are not, those who are listening, well, welcome. So you want to tell yourself a little, before we even get started, a little bit about yourself, Rich? You've got a pretty interesting history.
Okay, well, I come from Ann Arbor, Michigan originally. I moved from there to Florida in my early 20s, and I was a computer programmer for about 15 years. Last job was at Citibank. I was writing code that traded stock during the financial collapse, and I decided I didn't want to be a part of the system anymore, so I left Citibank and moved up to New Hampshire and became an activist. I ran the 420 rally in Keene from 2009 until it ran till about I think 2013 or 2012, and then I also do the 420 smokeout annually on April 20th at the State House, so we'll be up there in about another month.
Yeah, it's you certainly have understated your history, but that's probably fair to say for another day anyway.
Yeah, I didn't know how much time you wanted on it there.
Nah, a little intro is good. So we got a lot of stories coming up here today. For those who watch regularly, we've missed a show here. There is I totally messed up the intro. Broadcasting live from our Keene, New Hampshire studio. But we were also started a little bit late today because, well, I just wasn't prepared and we had some technical difficulties here. But it looks like everything is working as far as I can tell. And we'll go ahead and start the show. So let's get out of this. I don't want that up. So coming up, we're gonna try and get to. I don't know if you brought anything in, or I think you just said yesterday we would just
yeah,
play it by ear, I guess.
Yep.
But that's okay. I got lots of stories. So unfortunately I'm totally unprepared, so I don't know where we're gonna go or how far we're gonna get, and I might reorganize this a little bit. But we're gonna take a look at Mozilla. They're trying to redo Java, re-implement support for Java, and they think this is a good idea. This is a story from the Register. It's coming up in a little bit, and then we got a story from Motherboard or Vice, which is about researchers finding Google Play Store apps were actually government malware. Surprise, surprise.
Which apps and which government would be my first question.
I don't know, but I'm not sure it really matters.
Okay.
Ontario town will soon accept Bitcoin for property tax, which is actually something that, I don't want to get into it too much. We'll get to that a little bit. Then we got a story from Vodafone Germany. Apparently, they're going to be blocking popular pirate forum to avoid a lawsuit. So not just a piracy website, but a forum, a speech forum. Facebook is going to be blocking white nationalists apparently now, or white nationalists and white separatists posts. Yeah. UK is set to adopt vehicle speed limiters. Now let's see. I think let's try and get through that, and then so we tend to go through more stories on this show than so for those who don't know, now you do Free Talk, you're a host for Free Talk Live currently.
Yeah, I do Free Talk Live Thursday nights.
Yeah, okay, so I thought so. I know you did in the past. Yeah. But I wasn't sure if you were currently doing it. Okay, so that's cool. So Rich Paul is also co-hosts Free Talk Live, which is another show that I co-host. I co-host although on Fridays for those who aren't aware. All right. So yeah, let's start off with the first story, which is from Mozilla and Java. So this week, Mozilla announced a project called WASI WebAssembly System Interface, another technology I am not a fan of. Standardize how WebAssembly code interacts with operating systems.
Okay, now what is WebAssembly? This must be something newish.
It is fairly newish. It's I mean, from my
Oh, I
understanding,
actually saw below it. It sounds like it's actually an assembly language for the web.
yeah, it's basically to execute binary on like binaries, proprietary binary code on your local machine. Um,
Hmm.
that's my gist of it. If somebody wants to call in, the number here is 1-866-703-2989. Again, 1-866-703-2989. If you're not listening live, or listening and watching the show live on Saturday at 5 p.m. Eastern, don't bother. You won't get anywhere. But if you are listening live or watching live, I should say, give us a call and let us know what your perspective on that is. So yeah, WebAssembly is basically, it allows you to run proprietary software on your system, and they basically sandbox it. From what I understand, it's a really bad idea. It's sort of like ActiveX or Java all over again. And for those who aren't aware of the security implications, they're terrible.
Okay. Wow.
So if the project succeeds, it will do what Oracle Java Virtual Machine does, but supposedly better and more broadly. WebAssembly, or WASM, is a binary format for a virtual machine that can run across multiple hardware architectures. WASM code can be produced from various programming languages like C, C++, Go, and Rust as a compilation target. WebAssembly has been adopted by all major web browsers, but it doesn't yet have a standard way to run outside the browser. That's where WASI comes in. Code outside of a browser needs a way to talk to the system, a system interface, explains Mozilla software engineer Lynn Clark in a blog post, and WebAssembly platform doesn't have that yet. What's up with WASM? With WASI, WASM code will be able to run in a browser on any compliant environment, allowing language-agnostic cross-platform application deployment, where a portable operating system interface provides a way to make source code portable across Unix-like operating systems. WASI aims to make compiled binaries portable across devices and operating systems. It promises a universal runtime that runs at near native speeds. How many times have you heard this? I mean, I've just heard this, I've heard this since the 90s, and it's never worked with Java and ActiveX.
Yeah, I like to assume that we're getting closer to native speeds every time they say near native, but we've never gotten that close in my experience.
Yeah, I like the idea of compatibility, but I don't necessarily see this is a good idea. In the real world, all we end up with is basically people running binaries to execute on other people's computers, and them having terrible security ramifications as a result. It just seems like a really bad idea. It's bad enough we've got JavaScript, and now we have these proprietary actually totally proprietary, where we can't even see the code that's being executed on our machines.
Okay, now they're working this into Mozilla. Is it going to be a proprietary component within Mozilla?
I don't think so. I don't think that's not my interpretation. It's my interpretation is basically it's just basically going to be like Java, but for the different browsers, and then where it will execute. So the Java parts, the sources are available, and then but the applets are not gonna. They're not gonna. Generally speaking, most web developers don't really care, or companies or people who write code don't tend. Most of them on the web, in the web world anyway, don't tend to release the source code with the binaries that they're releasing when you go to a particular website. So it's kind of a broader issue, because we have the same issue with JavaScript, but at least with the JavaScript you can look at the code to some degree, and
although they obfuscate horribly.
Often it is, but sometimes it's for file size reasons, and sometimes it's for I don't even know what I guess proprietary, because they're trying to make it proprietary. I mean, I guess it is.
Yeah, I
Unless
think they don't
release
want their
it under a
code
license.
hacked.
Their
For
code
most
hacked.
of them.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
obscurity through security or no, let's see. Security through obscurity is really no security at all.
I make that assumption because I'm always, when I find their obfuscated JavaScript, I'm always looking to hack on something or change its behavior. I was like, oh no, this is incomprehensible.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just basically compressed, and they're doing it for performance reasons, not for actually obscuring the code. But certainly there's certainly no license. I mean, very, very rarely are you going to find licenses attached to the JavaScript that they're distributing, and then you're expected to execute. And if you try to disable the JavaScript, then the site doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, actually, I've found it's very useful because I use ad blockers. I've found that a lot of the sites where where it comes up when I go there and says, oh, well, you can't look at this site with an ad blocker. If I disable JavaScript on that site, the site commonly works.
Yeah, like news sites. Yeah, news sites in particular. I've definitely I've used that hack a number of times. It doesn't work across every news website, but it does work across a lot of them.
Yeah, some websites don't work at all with that.
Yeah, some websites it's just a matter of, especially when they give you like free previews, especially local sites, it'll be just like open a new private browser window and you can access them.
Yeah,
you can access the news site. I think the Sentinel in Keene is like that actually.
Yeah, last night we had a listener banned by Twitch and he couldn't get back in, and so I said, oh, well, open up an incognito session, and it worked.
Did it really?
Yep.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't realize Twitch was that
well, it was
of...
he was not only banned from Twitch, but he wasn't able to attach to the other place where the show was playing, and I don't know where that place was. So it was, I think, the other place. He couldn't get through to Switch from the incognito window, but I think he did get through to the other system that way.
I wonder if it's because Twitch code was running on the other site, and then Twitch just blocked. So what's interesting is if oftentimes you've got code from many different sources, and if say you have code from Facebook. Facebook could theoretically, I would imagine, be able to prevent the page from loading if they decided they don't like a particular user. So not only are they going to block you from Facebook.com, but they're going to block you from any other website that has like a like button on it, basically. I mean, I don't know why.
Does it work that way, or does it act as if you're not logged into Facebook? I don't know.
I don't. What I'm saying is malicious. If they're malicious, they could potentially inject code that way from the way because usually it's a web developer is just downloading the latest version of some. They're inserting code that gets downloaded from Facebook's website. They're not hosting their own code on their site. So, but even if they were, it probably wouldn't really matter anyway, because they could still write as part of that code that is hosted, regardless of where it's hosted, to basically. Check with Facebook and say if this is coming from somebody who is we don't like, prevent the page from loading. However that might be. It might be pop up some sort of pop-up, virtual pop-up that prevents you from seeing or using the page, or something like that.
Redirect to Disney.com.
Oh, that's just cruel and unusual.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a lot of porn sites used to do.
Did they? Yes, they did, didn't they? Or something similar to that. Yeah.
Yeah. If you weren't 18, it sent you to Disney.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't think there's too much more to this that I really want to cover, but yeah, this is just like what, and it's interesting because Mozilla has done so many. Like there's so many terrible things over the years, recently in particular, just like, from WebAssembly to Pocket to, this Java thing now. And I don't know. It all seems like a really bad idea. This actually, and I want to clarify something. So this isn't really Java. It's to be more specific, Mozilla tries to do Java as it should have been, which is kind of misleading. Because it's not really what they're saying, I don't think. Because it's their...
they're doing the virtual machine concept possibly as it should have been, but the language you write this stuff in won't be Java.
Yeah. So yeah. Oh, Well, unfortunately, we can't fix everything. There are other browsers out there, though. I was actually just looking at Epiphany today, which is Gnome's web browser. Which,
It's pretty good, eh?
oh, have you used it?
I have. I used to be a GNOME user
Oh,
back in the
interesting.
day.
You know, I may have used it in the past. And if it's what I'm thinking, it didn't really work that well. But I don't know. I don't know what the reason. I mean, anyway, it seems like it may. How do I phrase this? So the reason I was looking at it in part was because I noticed that Elementary OS included Epiphany as their default browser, and that kind of blew my mind. And it kind of suggests that it does work, or maybe my experience with it wasn't quite right. There wasn't maybe something wrong with the distribution, or I don't know. Maybe it was an old version and it wasn't staying up to date or something, that caused my experience not to be what it should. I actually liked Conqueror back in the day. For those who remember Conqueror's web browser, apparently it still exists and it actually looks fairly modern, from having tried it out the other day very, very briefly.
That was the KDE web browser, right?
Yeah, it was.
What does KDE use now? Just Chrome?
Well, Neon, which Neon is a distribution that is by the KDE developers. I guess it's put out by the KDE project. Basically, it's defaulting to Firefox. It includes Firefox by default, which is probably not a good sign for Conqueror. But I did install Conqueror on a machine and just try it out and see, does it still work? Is there a recent release? And I think I concluded there was a recent release and it did still work and it did look modern. So I don't know why, you think KDE, Conqueror being a KDE project, you'd think it would, they would have included Conqueror, but I don't know. And I can't even imagine that it would be much of an issue today. Basically, for those who don't know, Safari's WebKit is based on KHTML, which is the rendering engine from Conqueror. That's what it's based on. Now, I believe KHTML was replaced with WebKit at some point. So I don't think Conqueror is using the KHTML. It's using, I mean, again, they're kind of one and the same. But anyway, yeah. So I don't know. You would think it would work pretty well, but having not used it extensively in recent years, I don't know. Conqueror always worked well with KDE distributions in my experience. There were occasionally issues back in the day, but I mean, back in the day, we're talking probably like Internet Explorer, I don't know, maybe 6 was, maybe even earlier than that. 5, 6 was also,
wow. I don't know when those were out. I haven't used Windows in so long.
Well, I'm not entirely sure myself, but I'm thinking those were probably the browsers in use, or maybe even if they were not in use, they were websites were still coded to those browsers, if you know what I mean, at during that time period and for a long time after. So if you weren't using Internet Explorer, you could run into some issues on some websites. And I don't even know at that point, I don't even know if Firefox would probably have been in its infancy if it was even around yet. Yeah, it was a long time ago. So researchers find Google Play Store apps were actually government malware, according to Vice. Hackers working for a surveillance company infected hundreds of people with several malicious Android apps that were hosted on official Google Play Store for months, Motherboard has learned. In the past, both government hackers and those working for criminal organizations have uploaded malicious apps to the Play Store. And this is one of the things that I'm not a big fan of Android in general, because it's basically it takes all of the benefits of basically Linux, and then it just kind of throws out those or how do I say, it's not benefits, but some of the things that were invented in the Linux land, like app stores, basically. Okay. And, but it totally ignores the source code aspect of it. So if there's no source code, yeah, you're going to have a much higher chance of, including, malicious apps, not to mention, usually, like if you look at like how Debian has traditionally done it, for example, It wasn't a system where anybody could upload malware. It was a system where, in order to package for Debian, you had to have at least I think it was two other Debian developers basically vouch for you. So there was a system of authentication of a sort, and if you were to do something malicious, well, you would never be packaging for Debian again. So there was some sort of security involved. Whereas with the Android App Store, you don't have that. So there's all these risks that get introduced, and it doesn't create a fundamental barrier for malicious parties to basically gain control over your machine, sort of.
Yeah, well, you can't build a secure system to be used by stupid people. Not to put too fine a point on it, it takes
there is
a certain level of intelligence to operate any computer system safely.
I think there is some truth to that, but at the same time, I don't necessarily think that you can't put up some barriers. I mean, if you have no way of knowing whether an app is, anybody has ever even done a rudimentary investigation into the app, how are you going to know whether or not you might be able to trust it? Like, and this is the thing that I think has always been an issue in the Windows world, and why there's so much malware in the Windows world, because there's no way to tell somebody how to know whether or not an app is safe to download and install. I mean, you basically you don't know. Nobody knows. So I think the App Store, the Debian model, basically was and is still the right way to do it. I don't like the way Apple does it. I think Apple does it in a terrible way too. But yeah, I mean, Apple and Google, I think they just totally undermine the security advantages, at least of the concept of the App Store. And that's, I think, really why Linux and free software operating systems have been so much more secure than Windows and Apple operating systems over the years. It has nothing to do with user base, because ultimately, if I'm a hacker, especially back in the day, I would want to get access to servers, not people's personal boxes. Your personal box has a very slow internet connection. Servers, have high speed T1 lines and much faster internet connections. So I'm not going to target Windows. I'm going to target servers. I'm going to target Linux and Unix systems. If that's what I'm after. And I don't think we saw that. At least, I mean, I think we saw that, but it was more targeted attacks, not malware, random malware infections because of really dumb policies by operating system vendors.
Yeah. Speaking of dumb policies, another one for Mozilla that I just read about a little while ago. Did you know they don't encrypt the password list on disk?
Yeah. I wasn't specifically,
how is that a good idea?
Okay, so hold on. I wasn't specifically aware that Mozilla wasn't doing it, but I do understand the reason that the encryption has actually not been done generally. So one of the reasons has been that so traditionally speaking, yeah. So I guess you're talking about one password to encrypt all your passwords.
Well, I'm talking especially about the password list on disk.
Okay, so you explain to me what you're talking about specifically. Oh, you're talking about the logins.
Yeah, I'm talking about the Mozilla browser saving your stored passwords in clear text on your disk. So
wow.
You
okay. Yeah.
Open up the file with Vi
I follow you.
I follow passwords.
You. Yep. So, well, I mean, yeah. So the logic behind that has always been that it actually creates the perception of security through. Well, the perception of security that doesn't really exist, but I think that's not necessarily the case if you have a password to gain access to all your passwords, right? So
right, if the program can get at something without you putting in keystrokes like a password, then the system can access that information when you're not there without your authorization. It just like if
Yeah.
you boot up a system with an encrypted with an encrypted hard drive, you have to be there to type in the password, or the system isn't going to boot.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of password managers in general. I don't feel like they are a wise move. And partially I think that is the case in part because if a system is compromised, and you have to enter a password to gain access to all your passwords, well, as soon as you enter that one password, which you're pretty much going to do every time you log in, they're going to have access to all your passwords. On the other hand, if you have to enter passwords individually, they're only going to have access to whatever passwords that you've entered for the course up to the point in which you've identified that your system has been compromised. So if, for example, let's say you have a cryptocurrency on your computer, but you haven't accessed it in a week and your system gets infected, well, if you're using a password manager, they have access to all your crypto keys. On the other hand, if you don't use a password manager, they won't have access to them. If you recognize it fast enough, they didn't gain access to your cryptocurrencies and such.
Definitely true. Although I don't think I've ever used a password manager that would mess with my Bitcoin wallets, but of course my Bitcoin wallets are usually on my phone.
Yeah, but I think the concept, I think there is a potential benefit or advantage in some circumstances for password management technology, but I don't necessarily know it's generally a good idea for people to use it. I think generally speaking, I wouldn't avoid using it, but under select circumstances, there could be good use cases and good reasons to use it. Yeah. In the past, both governments, hackers, and those working for criminal organizations have uploaded malicious apps to the Play Store. This new case once again highlights the limits of Google's filters that are intended to prevent malware from slipping in or onto the Play Store. In this case, more than 20 malicious apps went unnoticed by Google over the course of roughly 2 years. That's actually not that bad considering how many apps are in Google's Play Store.
Yeah, although
but there's got to be more than
that's
that.
just the number that were identified
In
by this one
particular
researcher.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, okay, so this is the more interesting part. Motherboard has also learned of a new kind of Android malware on the Google Play Store that was sold to the Italian government by a company that sells surveillance cameras, but was not known to produce malware until now. Experts told Motherboard the operation may have ensnared innocent victims as the spyware appears to have been faulty and poorly targeted. Legal and law enforcement experts told Motherboard the spyware could be illegal.
Your tax dollars at work.
Yeah, right. But it does bring up an interesting question. On a platform like Android or Apple's iOS, where you're basically forced to go through the App Store, how does a government get malware onto this system?
Through the App Store.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's, and don't get me wrong, I don't think this is the only way they can do it. But certainly, yeah, I mean, if they're not exploiting some sort of bug, that is the way they would, go about it.
Well, I mean, Google is a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and I'm pretty sure if the U.S. government tells them to bend you over and spread your cheeks for them, they'll do it.
But this makes them. What's interesting is it makes basically Google and Apple collaborators.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, basically collaborators and violating people's rights, and that's kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think we know that antivirus companies can't be trusted, but you would think, or you would hope, that your operating system, whoever creates your operating system software, can be trusted.
Well, wouldn't that be nice? I mean, the thing with, I think about that all the time with Android, because it's like, even if I'm writing my own apps on Android and running them on my Android system, I don't know if the NSA has an ability to, for example, screenshot my system. Now, of course, I can't hide what I'm displaying on the screen from the rest of the system. There's no way to to prevent that. So it would be very easy to build malware right into Android, and then, you don't even have to worry about messing around with the App Store.
Yeah, so I guess this is targeting uh, human rights people too. Interesting. So yeah, I don't know. So we do actually know that. So how do I say this? We know that there is a backdoor built into Intel systems, and we know that there's equivalent functionality built into AMD systems as well. But with the backdoor, I'm sorry, we have reason to believe is how I should have phrased it for AMD systems. Well, no, we know the functionality is there. We don't know how it would be exploited, but I guess that's the best way to put it. So basically there's something called remote control functionality that's built into Intel CPUs or Intel firmwares. And so users basically can use this functionality, businesses, to remotely connect to basically any machine. And there was an exploit. It was discovered basically how the NSA is gaining access to people's computers, and it was basically the vulnerability is kind of it was a very obvious flaw in the software that even a CS 101 student wouldn't make. Basically, the way it works is this: if you send a password that is incorrect, it won't let you in. If you send the password that's correct, it obviously lets you in. If you send it a blank password, it also lets you in.
Oh, yeah,
And
I heard about that.
you can't send a blank password using normal tools provided by Intel, but when you have a tool that's customized for, say, a government agency, all of a sudden you can still get in if you send it no password. And
the
so
wonders of client-side security. That's not where you put your security code, people.
it looks like a bug, so it's deniable. But it's obviously, I think it's obviously not a bug, but it was a feature that was implemented for a government. And I think it's fair to jump to the conclusion that it's got to be the U.S. government, or is Israeli or the U.S. government, the only the two that I think that there's good reason to think that it's got to be one of the two. It just seems like there's so for those who don't know, Intel isn't a U.S. company. There are operations in Israel, I believe, like design.
I thought they were
operations
in Ireland.
I know Intel's a U.S. company. I don't know, U.S. and AMD are both U.S. companies. They have fabs outside of the United States, but their like development is and Israel as well for at least Intel. I'm not sure about AMD specifically. AMD doesn't have its own fabs. They use third-party fabs, but nonetheless, yeah. And there
Fabulous.
are fabs in the United States. But I don't know. I think Intel has or had them here in the U.S., but I don't know that they still do. I feel like they're closing down the ones in the U.S., but I might be wrong about that. And it was like a fairly recent thing. So, yeah. Yeah.
Don't trust your phone.
Yeah, I mean, you can't trust your phone anyway. But yeah, I mean, and for those who aren't aware, with the phones, every smartphone basically has a modem, and that modem has firmware. And the way these phones are designed, the modem firmware shares memory with the rest of the device, so it can read basically the memory on your device, meaning any kind of encryption you've got that you're using is compromised, because the government can remotely upload firmware to the modem firmware and replace that. And they have, actually. There was a case shortly after 2000 where a mob, this is the only story I've ever read where they've actually let on to this, they've actually let out this information, and I don't know that they intended to, or that maybe they realized later, or I don't know. But shortly after 2000, they basically came out. There was a story where an FBI agent was quoted as saying, "We remotely uploaded the firmware to the modem, and we're able to remotely." Now, in this case, it wasn't for the purpose of encryption. It was for the purpose of, I believe, turning on the microphone and remotely recording the mobster, I guess. But the point was that like they came out and said that they did this, and it wasn't really the FBI doing it. It was the cellular provider, but it was on behalf of the FBI. So they basically uploaded modified firmware to the user's phone, and we're then able to, and that's the other thing that can be accessed generally from the modem firmware is the microphone. So yeah.
Yeah, there's. I'm working on a replacement for flip phones. I mean, very early in the project. You're not going to get one of these things in 6 months or a year. But one of the things that I want to do is, rather than putting speakers and a microphone into the phone itself, I just want to have a USB port so you can plug a USB headset into it. And when you're not using it, you can pull that USB headset right back out of it, and then nobody can listen to you because there physically isn't a microphone there.
That is an interesting that's an interesting idea.
Yeah, there's no camera on my laptop. There is a microphone because I couldn't find a laptop without a microphone, but one of these days I'm going to get somebody to open the case and cut the trace to the microphone, so that can't be
Microphones
either.
On most laptops today are actually in the webcam. So if you basically have to disconnect the webcam.
See, I have no webcam.
Interesting. So this is an older machine, I assume?
No, it's actually a pretty new Dell. It was the only model that they offered without a webcam.
They actually offer a model without a webcam.
They actually offered a model without a webcam. It's one of their one of their developer boxes that comes preloaded with Linux.
Interesting.
Which is the other major reason I bought it, because I wanted to buy it and know for sure that, I mean, if they can get their Linux to work on it, I can get my Linux to work on it, so long as they're not using proprietary drivers.
I hold my breath on that one. But
it's been true for me so far.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that just because you can get it to work doesn't mean it's going to continue to work, and that's always my concern. So if you install Linux on a machine and it works today, and then you go to upgrade and the Wi-Fi stops working and there's just restrictions in the BIOS preventing you from replacing the Wi-Fi card, or the graphics or whatever, NVIDIA decides to stop, and they do, supporting that graphics chip, it no longer works anymore. And there's all sorts of issues like that, and I've seen it across the board with Dells and IBMs and HPs and Lenovo's and Shibas and Apples and mostly those systems from those companies. But there's certainly other issues you can run into with other manufacturers, but those 5 or 6 that I just mentioned are specific targets by me because they use digital restrictions on the Wi-Fi card slot.
Are you old enough to remember when people bought Dell because Dell used standard components and the other PC manufacturers didn't? Wow, how things change.
Yeah, I kind of do remember a time when Dell was not so terrible. But
yeah, it was like in the 90s, I think.
Certainly, yeah. Certainly in the I think it was like mid to late 90s, they basically did a reverse course, and they basically totally destroyed their reputation as a good manufacturer. And they
every time I have to open a Dell case, it's just like, okay, how does this one work?
Yeah, well, I mean, compared to like Compaq at one point, I mean, they were much better, but they basically, I mean, basically the CEO
Compaq had awful cases back in the day.
My God.
I don't know if they still do.
Does Compaq even still exist? They were bought by HP years ago. I guess they have the Compaq line. I know they did for a long time, but
yeah, for a long time it was HP and Compaq were produced as separate lines, even though they were owned by the same company. I don't know if that's changed since.
Yeah, I don't know.
Neither of them are brands that I would ever buy. So
yeah,
I mean, I would buy HP if I was running HPUCs.
Yeah, I would buy HP printers, or select model HP printers, but I wouldn't buy HP computers, that's for sure. Dell, HP, Lenovo, Toshiba, Apple, Sony, those 6. All those companies are definitely on my blacklist as far as their computers are concerned.
I've had pretty good luck with a Samsung laptop, which isn't something I would normally buy, but I bought it used for $50. So
gotcha.
And that actually worked out well for me with Linux, but it was an older model.
Gotcha. All right, let's see here. So so I thought that was an interesting story.
Yeah.
So so this is from CBC.ca, and apparently an Ontario town will soon accept Bitcoin for property taxes. So this is interesting, because there was a bill in New Hampshire that I actually testified on, to do something similar, but for the state of New Hampshire, not the town of Keene.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we'd have any chance at the town of Keene without going through the state. I don't even know if the town of Keene has the authority to accept cryptocurrency, because in New Hampshire we do not have home rule. We don't have home rule, I think is the way to phrase it.
True, which is probably a net benefit to us in Keene, since it's like the most liberal town in the state.
Keene's
so
awful.
They're held back from doing all the horrible things they want to do to us by lacking home rule.
Yeah, it's oh man, it's one of the worst places to be in New Hampshire, I think. But
the funny thing is, we moved here too.
I know.
I moved here because I was doing civil
abused.
disobedience, and Keene was considered a lost cause.
Right.
But now we're pretty much done with the civil disobedience. We've hit 20,000 people. We don't need to belt it out to the cheap seats anymore, but here we are in Keene. But, I'm having a good time because there's a lot of other leftovers.
Keens, I think Keene's a nice city to live in. But I don't necessarily think that the government they do all sorts of stuff, or they want to do all sorts of stuff. Let's put it that way. That is not kosher. It's not. Not
I didn't even know
to
they
my
were Jewish.
Yeah, right. I'm not.
No, them. The Keene government.
Oh, them. Yeah. I don't think
they don't keep kosher.
No, actually, New Hampshire is like the least religious state, isn't it?
It is. At least, I don't know if they look into intensity of feeling, but I think that Keene had the largest, or I'm sorry, not Keene, but New Hampshire had the largest cohort of atheists of any state as a percentage.
I think in general, the New England area is least, some of the least religious in the country, but particularly New Hampshire.
I think it would be hard to live, in Salem, Massachusetts, where they used to burn witches and take all this, religion is infallible stuff seriously. It's like, didn't you set a bunch of people on fire by mistake?
Yeah. So, so I haven't really read this story. Let's read a little bit into it and see what's happening. Starting April, in Innisfil resident. Wow, that is I think there's some pretty weird town names, but man, that takes the cake. Pennsylvania especially has some weird names out there.
Innisfil, that's interesting. There's a town and a camp in Michigan called Innisfree. I've never heard of Innisfil before.
I mean, either. Starting in April, Innisfil residents will be able to pay taxes with Bitcoin through a digital wallet operated by Coinberry Pay. I've never heard of them. Which will convert cryptocurrency to Canadian funds and transfer the payment to the town. The Ontario town of Innisfil will soon begin accepting digital currencies as payment for its property taxes, starting with Bitcoin. So this is interesting. So this is actually a town bigger than Keene. The town of 36,000 people is north of Toronto and south of Barrie, Ontario. Okay, so I really don't know where either of those are, but I know I've heard of Toronto.
They're in Canada.
Well, yeah, right. They're north of Keene.
Yeah.
They're north of the
It
United
is,
States.
to me, a testament to the tenacity of the human race that we've managed to occupy not only the entire habitable surface of the earth, but also Canada.
Its council voted late Tuesday in favor of the one-year cryptocurrency pilot project in partnership with a Toronto company. Starting in April, Innisfil residents will be able to pay taxes with Bitcoin through a digital wallet. Yeah, whatever. It's other forms of cryptocurrency may follow, such as Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash, and Ripple. The town's experiment is being launched amid controversy about the risks of using cryptocurrencies, which, unlike conventional currency, isn't backed by any government or central bank.
Liar!
Okay.
The dollar is not backed by anything. Don't give me that.
Yes, this is exactly the fallacy every time somebody makes this argument.
What will the government give you for the dollars? They'll give you more dollars for it. They'll break a 10, or they'll take 10 singles and give you a 10.
there's nothing backing the dollar. There's nothing backing most currencies, fiat currency. If maybe I don't even know if any fiat currency today is backed.
Well, by definition, a fiat currency isn't backed.
Oh yeah, good point. Right, because otherwise it would be like a gold backed or a silver backed.
It would be a backed currency.
Right.
It'd be a real currency.
All right, let me rephrase this. So I should.
There's no paper currency issued by a government today which is backed by any commodity that I know.
That's what. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the point. And it was
now somebody tried a few years ago. There was an attempt.
Not a government though, right?
Well, they were attempting in North Africa to create a gold-backed currency, and the guy who was doing it was a guy named Muammar Gaddafi. But hey, the United States invaded and killed him.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Sorry, Muammar.
Yeah. So I mean, so the interesting part about this is we had gold. Was it gold? We had the gold standard up until not that long ago, right?
The gold standard existed. The price of gold was fixed at between $20 and $21 from the beginning of the country until 1931 or something, when FDR confiscated the gold, paid the owners of the gold $20 an ounce, and then immediately devalued the dollar to be 1/35 of an ounce of gold. So he stole, a quarter of the value right off the top. And so the price stayed at $35 an ounce.
Sounds like socialism.
For a long time until in the 1970s. But after that, citizens couldn't buy and sell gold for dollars from the U.S. bank. Only foreign governments could do it. So I don't understand why the government would want only foreign governments to do something American. Well, I do understand. It's because they're engaged and they're up to no good. But and then in the 1972, I think, Nixon, they were running out of gold, and Nixon just said, we're going to temporarily close the gold window. So he would no longer redeem dollars for gold, and that temporary closure is still going on 50 years later almost. So, yeah, we are completely disconnected from gold now. And gold, for those of you who don't know, is right up around $1,500 an ounce.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so it's interesting. It's interesting to see that there are more and more successes in terms of getting different government bodies around the world to accept cryptocurrencies. I mean, it's not new.
Does that really does it do much good? Because on the one hand, yeah, it would be nice to save the money that I would normally. I mean, normally I would have to pay a fee, I guess, to convert my crypto to cash. So if I can pay the government in crypto, that fee goes away. But I mean, if they've got a separate company which is transforming it into cash, then is there a fee on top of it?
There is, but
okay.
It's probably 1%. That's what it has been that's what it is in Ohio with coin. I'm sorry, not coin payments. Well, I didn't even say that, but BitPay. That is the case with BitPay in Ohio for taxes. So basically, here's I can actually explain why this is a benefit to users. So if somebody is accepting cryptocurrency and they actually getting paid in cryptocurrency and they want to cash out, they will probably have to pay a fee to cash out.
Mm-hmm.
If they spend it, they won't have to pay that fee. So they might have to pay 1%, but that's that's nothing. If you were to say pay your taxes with a credit card, you'd be paying 3%. So
yeah, that's definitely true.
It may not be the case that it may not necessarily be the case that I would say, generally speaking, that I would much rather receive cryptocurrency, because if somebody sends me cryptocurrency for payment for goods or purchasing services from me, I'm not giving Visa or MasterCard or American Express 3%. Okay. So I'm saving 3% right there. Plus, if it costs me 1% to send it to, the government, so what? And
You're
that
still
1%,
saving about 2%.
right? And that 1% only exists because the government is insisting that it gets converted to cash. Okay, so if the government would just accept cryptocurrency and hold hold that cryptocurrency, or spend it themselves, we wouldn't have that 1%.
It would be nice if rather than paying in a currency, I could just tell my wallet to pay your wallet, and our wallets could put their heads together and figure out, which currency I like least and you like most.
Yeah. And there's something else I should also bring up. Credit cards actually have a higher not a transaction fee. They have a 3% transaction fee, but they have a higher cost, is what I'm trying to say. Because there's 3% that is in the transaction fee itself, but there's also credit card fraud and other losses as a result, and those can be as high as 3%. So and if you take that on both sides of the transaction, when you spend it and when you receive it, you're talking about as much as 12% loss as a result of payment, your typical payment networks. And it's not just credit cards that this applies to. It also applies to PayPal and other basically payment mechanisms. Now, it may be a little bit different math wise if you're doing like a wire transfer, but wire transfers can get very expensive as well. I've had customers do wire transfers. They spend I think it was something like $120 in wire fees on less than $120 worth of goods, like $170 worth of goods. They pay $120 like wire fees, basically.
That's crazy.
It's absolutely insane. I mean, but the reason they did that was because they disliked credit card companies so much. They were not willing to give the banks any money. Or actually, I think it actually was I think their issue was actually,
who disliked credit card companies?
A guy in Sweden, I believe it was. And Sweden, you basically have to use a credit card. And if you don't, it's really, really hard to live in Sweden. He rejected goods. Well, he didn't reject them so much as he wouldn't pay the delivery fee, the customs fee, using a credit card, and that was his only option. Also, so the transaction, he paid the $120, but it was even more complicated to get the goods to him without him having to pay a credit card fee, because it first had to go into the UK via a third party, prepaid as far as the customs fee went, and then directed to him that way. So he was paying us directly, but ultimately there really was still a credit card fee being paid, because guess what? Somebody had to pay it, and the only way to pay it was pretty much to use a credit card.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, so I do see some benefit there.
Yeah, I think there are definitely benefits, lots of benefits potentially in all sorts of areas for cryptocurrency. And most people, they don't see it. Most financial people don't understand all of the costs of credit cards, and they to the degree that they may recognize it if you bring it up, they don't recognize the total costs, real costs.
I guess the reason my immediate reaction to that is always negative is like, well, taxation is theft, so now they can steal my crypto. But of course, if they steal my crypto, they're not stealing my dollars, and if they're stealing my dollars, they're not stealing my crypto. So I guess it's one way or the other.
Yeah, I guess how much are you willing to put up with? Are you well, you're a good person to ask this. Are you willing to sit in a jail cell until they release you if you refuse to give them your passwords for your crypto keys?
Well, I mean, right now I don't have enough money to make that worth it. I'd be sitting there for like $35. But if and when the balance is big enough, sure. The other thing is, there's no reason you can't have more than one wallet. So please, if you're keeping a lot of money in crypto, don't just keep your password hidden. Keep your money in a wallet that isn't on your phone. There's no reason to carry around your life savings in crypto on your phone. That's just silly.
I think in time it'll get easier, certainly, or it'll at least be more expensive for government to spy on people potentially. or it'll make them have to spy on people rather than just doing raids and stuff and finding crypto wallets and things. Because ultimately, right now, with Bitcoin, it can be tracked relatively easily, right? Whereas something like Monero or Zcash is not. And so I think in the future, it will potentially be easier to say, have your crypto somewhere else and send crypto, however much you want to spend, to a device like your phone, and spend it. But then if you were to say get raided, they wouldn't know about your cryptocurrency because it's not trackable. So they would see that you got $500 from some source, but they don't know that it's your source. They don't know it's your money. They don't know where you got it from upstream. Whereas with Bitcoin, they know if you have another Bitcoin wallet that it's your Bitcoin and how much is in there too. So
you'd want to send it through Shapeshift or something like that.
If you're Ross, that's not going to solve the problem because they're going to be monitoring your house and tapping your everything, and so when they break in, they're already going to know about your hidden stash. But for your ordinary individual, that's probably not going to happen. So there is, I think, going forward, there's the potential for privacy and security of your funds more than they currently exist, at least.
It would be nice to write a wallet that had multiple passwords. So if you put in one password, it opens up one wallet. And if you put in a different password and there's more than one wallet, it opens up the second password. So they say, oh, put in your password. Oh, no problem. Here you go. Put it in and you've got $5 in that wallet.
What is that, steganography?
It's not quite steganography. Steganography is when you hide the ciphertext within the data of another file, but it's a similar concept. It's a way of hiding the fact that the data is there, even from people who are looking at the data.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. I wouldn't mind seeing that implemented, but I don't know. It's one of those things that might be really interesting in some sort of legal case to see what happens. But I mean, ultimately, it still requires people to keep their mouths shut and hope that they haven't been monitoring you long enough to realize that you have a second. If they have to ask, they probably haven't been monitoring you long enough. But if they have, it probably won't really work anyway. But hey, if they have to monitor every single person before they conduct a raid, that's a great value. That's a great benefit because it's
the more
it
the work
much more
they
expensive.
have, the more work they have to do, the fewer times they can do it.
Yeah, exactly. Which increases people's security and privacy from government abuses if they can only target people who are much higher up on the targeting list, basically. So it'll be fewer people who get hurt basically by government. So let's see here. So this is a story from Torrent Freak, and this is an interesting story. Vodafone. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I guess it's Vodafone.
Vodafone.
Yeah, Vodafone Germany blocks popular pirate forum to avoid lawsuit. Internet provider Vodafone has started to block access to the popular pirate linking forum BohrSC.2 in Germany. The ISP feels compelled to take this action without a court order to avoid a legal dispute with local rights group Gemma. So this is an interesting story because they're not targeting a piracy website. They're targeting a linking website, which is or a forum, which is very different. So you might be able to make an argument on like copyright grounds for a site that's actually violating somebody's copyright, but this site is basically outright and pure censorship of people's speech.
Is it just leaks or just links they're saving there?
They're blocking the entire site.
Right. Okay. I was guessing just from the way it played out that maybe they were offering the software for direct download rather than offering just links to it. That's also
They're calling
hilarious that it has a .bz extension, because I want to unzip the thing before I look at it.
So they're calling it a popular pirate linking forum. So I'm assuming forum meaning like, you know, Free Keen has a forum, and pirate linking, I'm thinking people posting links to pirate content.
Oh, it does say pirate linking forum.
Yeah, so it's not and that's to distinguish it from a hosting.
Yeah, I think you're right then.
A pirate hosting platform, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. So the site launched in 2014 following the demise of something, predecessor, blah, blah, blah. A few days ago, subscribers of Vodafone Germany noticed that something wasn't right. All of a sudden, they were unable to access the Bors.2 domain instead of the usual homepage. They were redirected to a blocking notification. So interestingly, I've actually experienced this in Europe. Now, it was not to pirate websites, but it was to news websites, actually. So free speech, the Europeans really hate freedom of speech.
Well, at least European governments do.
Yeah, or at least the governments do.
European people aren't doing much about it, although I notice as the Yellow Vest protests go on, I've been talking to some Frenchmen about guns, and they're starting to understand why they need them.
Okay, yeah. So wait a minute. This is not about Article 13. So okay, but it's kind of related. Anyway, yeah. So I mean, basically, it's Article 13 is more about the news stories, copyrighting of news stories, or linking to copyrighted news stories. But anyway. Let's see here. On the basis of a notification from Gemma, we have to set up a DNS blockade for the Bors.2 domain. The blockade affects Vodafone GmbH's fixed and mobile network. A Vodafone spokesman informs Torrent Freak. Yeah, I thought the image that Torrent Freak was linking to for a second was blocked.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, that is hilarious.
Yeah.
The measure doesn't come out of the blue. Vodafone was previously notified by its service provider 1&1. I actually don't even understand what they're talking about. 1&1 isn't 1&1 like a hosting company?
They do hosting, and they also do domain registration. I didn't know they were an ISP, and I'm not sure from this that they are, but they do hosting and domains.
I guess the
I have my invisiblehand.church at 1&1.
Okay. I'm guessing that what that means is that basically Vodafone provides cellular services, but they said they also provide fixed line services. So maybe this is an upstream provider to Vodafone. That's what I'm imagining. Because they're saying that they notified 1&1 and then they basically Vodafone after that. So yeah. Let's see here. There's no court directing the ISP to implement the blockade. Vodafone believes it has to take action in order to avoid liability. Yeah, this is the danger of the way these systems are working now. There's no court order. There's no definite clear copyright violation. But because somebody says so, who has an interest in the copyright industry, I guess, or copyright content, you basically have to do what they say.
And this is the ISP problem, because, given the original design of the internet, you shouldn't be talking to an ISP. You should be talking to 4 of your neighbors, and each of your neighbors should be talking to 4 of their neighbors, so that the whole thing is a web and no one person can cut you out.
That would be ideal, like a mesh network, basically.
Well, yeah, that's the original design of the internet. Then they built this ISP-powered monstrosity on top of it.
Well, I don't know that we ever really had a true mesh. I mean, if we did, then we would not be reliant on central providers of any kind.
Well, the original design for the internet was it had to be designed in such a way that any 6 cities in the United States could be nuked without taking down the internet. That was the original internet, and it was just shared by defense companies, the military, the government, and colleges. So in 1995, when Al Gore came along and said information superhighway, and everybody found out that the internet had existed for 30 years and started using it, that's when you
basically what
started
happened,
seeing.
too.
Huh?
That is really basically what happened too. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's also partially because it wasn't commercial until like 93 or 4.
Well, exactly. That's when it became commercial. And then all of a sudden, the companies like CompuServe and AOL all started attaching to the internet. And then you had the advent of
Right, because we had networks. We had
private
networks
private
before
ISPs.
we had networks before the internet, right? There was CompuServe, for example, and AOL,
Mhm.
and those predate the internet, the commercial internet.
Yeah,
So-
and those both became gateways to the internet for their users
Right.
for a while they were
at a
still
later
around.
point. I don't know. I've always no, I've always questioned in some certain cases whether or not like AOL was really an internet provider, only because they did it. I think they did it. They did more like a proxied internet, and it wasn't like a real direct internet, which also probably meant that you didn't really have. And I also would make the statement of a lot of ISPs today, even if you block a port, you're not really providing internet services anymore. It's not the internet. The internet is you can access any other party, and if you can't access any other party, you're not really providing a true internet service. It's kind of like fraud, I think.
I don't know if AOL was like that. I never used them. Back in that day, all of us were using Usenet, and we had this thing called a twit filter.
Yes.
It was like your block list on Facebook, and so we all, as soon as AOL got internet access, we all just put the whole AOL.com domain in our twit filter and forgot about them. Because there was never any intelligence coming out of AOL.
Oh wow, yeah, I remember AOL back in the day. AOL, if you were a how do I say this? Basically, if you were somebody with not necessarily the most what's the word? Wholesome intent, the best intent, let's put it this way. And
If you were ill-intended.
yes, if you wanted to take advantage of somebody, you would basically go on any AOL, I guess, chat room, I think it would be. And you could, from that, you could get like their email address, I think it was. And you could then email them links to sites that looked like AOL that had the URLs were clearly not AOL. And like 99 out of 100 times, they would submit their credit card number to you. And,
Wow.
yeah, but it just demonstrated how incapable or incompetent, I won't say incompetent, but uneducated people were about the internet back in those days. I don't know if it's gotten much better, to be honest. But
I don't know either.
But yeah,
There's a lot of silly people out there. I used to work for a CEO who would click on a landmine just to see what it did. I took 50 viruses off his computer one day.
yeah. Let's see here. As an access provider, we are critical of these blocking requests. We comply with a legal obligation here, the ISP notes, adding that it verified in advance that Gemma took its own pre-litigation efforts against the original infringers. Interesting. So I'm wondering, were they required to? Maybe they were required to. And let's see, I'm trying to think, does Article 13 change this? Or how does Article 13 change this? Anyway, I guess I don't know if Article 13 does change this particular situation, because it's Article 13 is more about upload filters and linking to news stories than it is about linking to pirated content. All right, let's go on. This isn't the first time that Vodafone has implemented a pirate blockade based on these arguments. It did the same last year after it was notified about infringing activity at streaming portals S.to and BS.2. So this is probably a good time to point out, if you're in Europe, Think Penguin sells privacy-friendly VPN services. Go over to thinkpenguin.com. This is the sponsor of this show, and I am the CEO, by the way. And click on networking, and you can purchase VPN services, either that you can configure yourself Or you can purchase a little mini VPN wireless router where once connected, all your traffic will transparently be passed through to a VPN service provider that does
How
not.
much are those? How much are those?
So without the VPN service itself, it's $40. They do actually work with other VPN providers, but you have to configure them, and it's like 30 steps. And there's directions for like maybe 6 or 7 other VPN providers. Like private internet. I'd probably recommend private internet access if you want to go with a third party. Just because I have more confidence that they're, how do I say this? Like,
Not bending over for the government.
yeah, exactly. it's like this.
I know, right? What's on your mind?
Yeah. If you want to like actually benefit from a VPN service, you may not want to use one that bends over for the government. Yeah.
It's also not a bad idea if you're really concerned about security to start one VPN tunnel and then start a second VPN tunnel through it so that both VPN companies have to betray you in order for anybody to get your content.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably at that point you're probably best off doing Tor over VPN and then using something like Tails. But
I figured we were using Tor over the second VPN.
Oh, yeah, you're gonna.
I'm not paranoid. They're really out to get me.
You're gonna end up adding a lot of latency, and I don't necessarily know that adding another VPN adds any additional security. I certainly think a single VPN might, but 2 VPNs, I'm not as sure about. But
I'm not 100% sure either. I'm gonna have to check that out.
So I definitely think that there is a usefulness to add a single VPN, and one of these, and particularly in a lot of different circumstances. And just as an example, and I'm not advocating anybody do this, but if you're going to send a bomb threat to your school, okay, you don't want to go to your school's network over Tor. Because they're going to know exactly who did it as soon as they realize, oh, the message came from somebody on Tor, and 2, there was only one Tor user at the time that the message was sent on the school's network.
Oh, if your school's running the Tor node?
Right. If you went to a VPN first, they wouldn't know that you're using, and then you use Tor. They wouldn't know that you were the one who had sent the threat.
Well, they wouldn't know who was connected unless you were Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I
you
see
follow.
what you're saying. You're using it to send an email.
And just to be clear, that's
in.
not necessarily perfect either. They're still going to suspect you probably, but it's going
And if you use Tor to log in, they still know who you are.
Yeah, I mean,
okay, you can't hide anything.
Yeah. So it also one of the other reasons for this is if they're trying to target somebody, there's a lot more Tor users in, say, the New York City area than in, I don't know, some small area.
Keene, New Hampshire.
Yeah, I don't think Keene's that small, but yeah, if you're in a rural area for sure, there's not going to be a whole lot of other users using Tor. So you want to make it look like you're coming from somewhere that is, I don't know, not where you actually are when you access Tor, because you're going to increase your risk there. The way Tor works, the more users near you that are using Tor, the harder it is for them to identify, which Tor user is the one who, whatever. And again, like I said, I'm not advocating people send bomb threats to schools or, do anything illegal. But
no, that's a bad plan. If you're going to send a bomb threat, it really ought to go to the government.
Well, I mean, presumably that could be a school because government schools. But yeah.
Well, true, but a more dangerous part of the government.
I don't know, man. Schools are pretty dangerous. Government schools.
Yeah. Do the schools themselves kill a lot of people, though? I mean,
it's not. I don't think it's so much about. Yeah, I mean, okay, so it's not so much about.
See, the rest of the government will just whack you.
Yeah,
the schools will prevent you from getting educated if you pay too much attention.
Ultimately, they're gonna kidnap somebody who is not cooperative as far as the government schooling is concerned.
This is true,
unless, and it sort of depends on where you are too, and whether or not you're willing to, I don't know, go to some other school or educational program or something that's not government specific. But if your objection is school, then yeah, you're basically screwed if you're in most probably Western countries, because most Western countries like require it. I wonder if there's any that don't actually require it.
Well, I mean, in New Hampshire, you can homeschool.
Yeah,
so
but that's still requiring it.
schooling is required, or education is required, but schooling isn't necessarily required. You don't have to go to
That's
the
true.
government indoctrination centers to get your
Okay, so
education.
education, if somebody doesn't want to be educated, why they wouldn't want to learn, something or the basics or I don't know, something is beyond me. But if they didn't, they should have that right. And the question is, would New Hampshire force them? And I think the answer is they would. It would. The government would.
I think if they weren't doing some sort of homeschooling that was somehow documentable, I think they would take action against the parents.
Yeah, I think so too. So yeah. Commenting on the blockade, Gemma said that it would prefer to take action against site owners directly. However, this isn't always possible, often because operators are unknown. I think this is kind of funny. Like it seems like even like sites that are set up fairly anonymously frequently get taken down. I mean, I don't know that there's any bulletproof domain that you can even register that will never be taken down.
Well, there is. It's the
What would that be?
it's the TOR, the one that's used by Tor.
Oh, yeah,
the
that's fair.
Darknet campaign.
I don't know if that.
Or
Okay,
the
so
Darknet, because you're using Onion files. That's what I was looking for. The extension is Onion. I was
yeah,
looking for the file extension. So Onion files. Obviously, it's not a domain in the classic sense of the word, but it does. It provides the same service as domain service and provides it in a way that it can't be cut off, is my understanding.
true. I think this is only to a degree though, because ultimately, it's not accessible from the rest of the web.
Right. Well, it's
it's
accessible only if you go through Tor.
right, which is not part of. I don't even know how you would phrase it. Like it's not part of the.
Well, Tor is effectively a glorified VPN, as I understand it, running on top of the internet.
I mean, it's like an onion. I mean, yeah. I mean, it is running on top of the internet exactly. So I don't know. It's not the same thing as a like a normal domain.
Yeah, it's not
name.
quite the same as a domain. There's
Yeah, I
no
don't-
.onion domain that the internet
it's a weird one.
recognizes. It's a kind of
It's
file.
a weird one because the .onion domain name, right, is reserved explicitly for Tor.
Is it?
It is. It's official. But you
Interesting.
can't register a .onion domain name in the traditional sense.
Mhm.
And nobody who uses the traditional domain name system can access a .onion site without Tor. So, and Tor is not like a standard thing that comes part of, anything. So
those onions are when it says onion, that's not a file. It's actually an address into the onion network. Is that how it works? I always thought it was a data file that contained information on how to access it, but
it
I've never looked.
is a list basically of IP addresses, I think, that get tied to nodes, and they get that list basically gets updated for like any given point, and then yeah, it works something like that. So it's yeah, I mean it's sort of like DNS, but it's weird. It's certainly it's not. Your normal Firefox web browser is not going to be able to access a .onion site. Let's put it that way. Nor is any other program on your computer unless you've gone and downloaded the Tor software.
Yeah.
So
Unless you've got a Tor clone on your computer, in which case it might work, but I don't know if there is one yet.
yeah, there is. I think there's a reimplementation of Tor or some section thereof in some other programming language. I think it might be
cool.
Go or something. I think it might be Go. I don't know. Anyway, but don't quote me on that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's basically it, I think, for this story. I think we covered that pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take a break, and we'll be back shortly after a message from...
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeen.com. Freekeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. Freekeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. Freekeen.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.
It's difficult.
We'd like to.
And we're back. So I feel like I was missing something there, but I actually don't think we were missing anything. It was, we did play both of the brief messages from sponsors. We don't actually have one for Think Penguin, so. All right. Let's see here. Where are we? So Facebook censorship is definitely accelerating all over the internet these days. We have the story from the WashingtonPost.com. Facebook says it will now block white nationalist, white separatist posts. And we'll be right back after these messages again.
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeen.com. Freekeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. Freekeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. Freekeen.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.
Let's go back. All right, try two. Sorry, guys.
Well, we can cut that out, can't we?
Yeah, technically, unless you're watching live. So, just had some technical difficulties here. So, Facebook says it will now block white nationalist, white separatist posts. So, Facebook said Wednesday that it will begin banning posts, photos, and other content that reference white nationalism and white separatism, revising its rules in response to criticism that a loophole had allowed racism to thrive on its platform. So we're having problem after problem here. So apparently I don't actually have the full story on this one. But I don't necessarily know we really need to go into it anyway. Sometimes I do just like to bring up the headlines and things and basically mention them. These are just, we just have too many good stories.
That's interesting, but I don't think suppressing ideas is a good way to defeat ideas. I think it's better to let people say what they're going to say and then let other people refute them than to try and silence somebody.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. We have, I think, I want to say the people on the left who seem to be obsessed these days with censoring others who have views that are different than their own. And I have to say, what happens when you are in the minority and the right wants to start censoring you? Because this happens on both the right and the left. They both want to censor people just for different reasons.
Well, we've already seen what happens then. It's the 1960s. The right is censoring the left, and the left forms a group called Students for a Democratic Society, which was, believe it or not, a free speech group. But then when the shoe was on the other foot and they had the opportunity to take free speech from others, they did exactly that, because, you know, injustice isn't injustice when it's not happening to you.
Yeah. It's very true. Very well said. Yeah. So speaking of governments and, basically, or others, I shouldn't say governments, others, because ultimately it comes down to other people, right? Others wanting to control you. This is a story from the BBC, by the way. The UK is set to adopt vehicle speed limiters. Now, what do you think about that? They want to mandate every car on the road have a speed limiter starting in 2022. So we're literally talking about a few years from now. They basically get to decide whether or not you can go a little faster than the speed limit if you feel it's safe, or
that's
some roads are just, and think about traffic problems that this is going to cause and similar.
Oh yeah, and it depends on how it works. If it just puts a maximum speed on the car where you can't go above X number of miles an hour, that's a problem. But if it's a thing where your speed can be dynamically changed, then I would be really concerned. One of the things that they've always wanted was to be able to kill cars from a distance.
Well, what if I want to say take my car to the racetrack, or I don't know, travel outside of the geographic boundary of the European Union, right? Am I not allowed to go faster than the 72 miles or whatever that, my car is now limited to?
Well, the other thing is what happens if you go on the Autobahn.
Yeah,
they don't even have a speed limit. They're in Germany, which is, last I heard, part of the European Union. So are they going to throw a speed limit on the Autobahn?
I have heard of that. I have heard that they're talking about like putting, and I know there are speed limits on the Autobahn now, but I don't think it's across the whole Autobahn, but they're talking about putting it, I think, across the whole Autobahn. So yeah, but what if you're not in Germany, right? You're not even in the European Union.
You've got this car.
Right, and you've got this car, right? Like, I don't know. It just seems, and then the next question is there a benefit anymore to having a car with a bigger, better engine if, nobody can actually take advantage of it?
Well, shouldn't everybody be equal? We don't want to have mile per hour inequality. Everybody should be traveling at the same rate of speed at all times. Otherwise, we have vector inequality.
I talked the other day on Friday on Free Talk Live about how the European Union has impoverished its citizens, and the citizens don't even realize that they're impoverished. When your goods cost twice as much, even if your income is as high as, I'm not even sure this is necessarily the case, say the US, you're still not doing as well as somebody in the United States. And that's not to say that people in the United States are doing great either. It's getting worse and
We're also
worse,
being impoverished by our government.
Right. But it's even to an even greater degree in Europe. And
Yeah.
I want to say I know that I know a lot of stuff is twice as expensive in Europe, and I know people will be like, well, yeah, but water is cheaper or eggs are cheaper or whatever, right? The problem with that is that it's still, generally speaking, across the board more expensive in Europe to live than it is in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not to say that that's true across Europe, but comparing apples to apples, roughly, right? It's cheaper in many places in the much cheaper in many places in the United States than it is in Europe. And even in similar sized cities, for example, you'll find that it's still 2-3 times as more expensive to live because even additional socialist created problems, basically. And some examples are like the good examples, I would say, are, and we have the same problems in the United States, don't get me wrong, it's just that they're not as widespread. For example, there are I'm trying to think what they call it. It's basically housing restrictions on building housing and regulations on constructing new buildings. Okay, if you put a cap on how expensive how much you can charge for rent, let's say, and actually Canada did this for a while, and they realized nobody's building new buildings, and the prices went up and went up and they went up.
New York City had the same problem.
Right, but because they put the cap on it, nobody built new buildings. So basically, like it was weird. It was like it basically pushed people out. Like nobody could afford to live in. I can't remember what city it was, but it may have been more than one city in Canada. But the point was, I'm thinking of one particular city, and ultimately they ended up abolishing the restrictions, the price. I'm not using the right word. The caps, on housing, how much somebody could charge for rent, and they eliminated that. And then all of a sudden, guess what happened? That's when the prices went sky high. But it's because there was not enough construction, because there had not been any apartment buildings built in many years. So
in New York City, people will burn down their own rent-controlled apartment buildings just to free up the real estate so they can do something on it that turns a profit.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it creates some really dangerous situations.
It's called landlord lightning.
Anyway, yeah, I mean,
Starts a lot of fires.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that creates these sorts of problems are these government regulations, that people don't understand how the laws that sound really good ultimately impact their own well-being. So it's a problem, and it's a problem that's getting worse, and people are demanding more regulation, and they just don't realize it's actually making the situation even worse than it already is.
In case you're intellectually challenged, let me fill you in. It's better to be employed at $10 an hour than unemployed with a $15 minimum wage.
That's true too. Yeah. No, I mean, I think the answer I think the answer in a lot of cases is move, because the places that are becoming more or leaning more socialist are getting worse and worse and worse. And if you continue to stay and you live in an area where the cost of living exceeds your wages, you're not going to be able to do well in that area. And that's why you see people fleeing California. You see people fleeing Europe. You see people going the other direction. And it's not to say that, Europe, there's not opportunity in Europe still for people who are in even worse off next to the woods, so to speak. But so you will see immigration to Europe, but that doesn't necessarily mean Europeans are doing well compared to other parts of the world, or other places that don't have that red tape. And it's actually interesting because it's I'm trying to think is it Singapore? No, it's Hong Kong. It might be Hong Kong. Hong Kong is actually has been mentioned as like a libertarian utopia. And I have a lot of criticism for that, only because the way they deal with property in Hong Kong is they rent out the land for like the government rents the land for 50 years or 100 years or something like that, and they restrict building. So it basically it increases the costs of rent to these extremes, and that artificial restriction by the government actually has basically the same effect. It's where they make their money, basically. Because when they do that, it means they can charge more for the leases to the land, where landowners then build apartments and things. Anyway, ultimately, it's an indirect tax. Okay. And so while other areas like business and things like that might be really good in Hong Kong, it's not the case. And I might even have the wrong city, guys, but it's not the case that there are no taxes or there is no socialism. It's just manipulated. Yeah, it's just manipulated so you don't see it. So yeah.
Right. Singapore is very good in a lot of ways, but then Singapore is known as the fine city because anything you do in Singapore will net you $1,000 fine.
Oh yeah. Singapore is definitely, I definitely know Singapore has got some really strict laws.
Yeah. But economically, they're actually pretty prosperous because they're relatively free in that respect.
Yeah, I don't know. Singapore, a lot of
you
these...
can't bring gum into Singapore because they're afraid you'll throw it on the ground.
Yeah, from what I understand, actually, you won't get arrested if you go into a shop and ask for gum if you're a foreigner. But if you are not a foreigner, ooh, ouch! I don't want to be in that situation.
Wow.
But yeah, and I guess it's something to the effect of that they understand that foreigners don't like realize that it's illegal or something, and like. I don't know. And they actually will even sell it to you, I think.
Wait, they actually have gum?
They have gum, but you have to get it by prescription
stores?
if you're
you
a
have
local.
To get it by prescription.
Yeah. I know that sounds funny,
wow.
but it's true. And yeah, but I guess if you're a foreigner, I guess they will sell it to you or something. And they won't like come and arrest you and lock you up or something. But wow. Yeah, it sounds absolutely crazy, but yeah, that's how it is in Singapore.
That's a sticky situation.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? So I didn't say what was coming up, so I kind of want to be a little bit more picky about the stories because some of these I would rather do and some of them I wouldn't. Let's see, dozens of people. Let's see. Oh yeah, this is a good one. So this is from WeLiveSecurity.com. WeLiveSecurity or Live Security. That's weird. Global police arrest dozens of people in dark web sting. More trouble in dark markets. A notorious black market bazaar announces plans to close up shop on the same day that police announced the arrests of 61 people. So, did you guys cover this on Free Talk Live at all?
We talked about it a little bit.
So, law enforcement from Europe, the United States, and Canada have announced the results of a recent international operation against dozens of people who reportedly sold and bought illicit goods on the dark web. The sting led to arrests of 61 people who are believed to have plied their trade using 50 dark web accounts. The police also seized nearly 300 kilos of drugs, 51 firearms, and over 6.2 million euros, I'm thinking, around $7 million. The 2/3 were in virtual currency, while the remainder was in cold hard cash. I'm shocked actually that we don't know more people who are getting nabbed this way, Rich.
Yeah.
Do you know who? Do you know a bunch of people
who are getting arrested?
Yeah.
No, I mean Ross.
Yeah. Okay. Ross is one, but that's not like.
Yeah, I mean I haven't known anybody since then who's been arrested for anything on the dark web, and it's like they caught their 61 people over what period of time? Wasn't that like a 2-year operation or something? Is that what they said?
Yeah, that's a good question. It probably was at least a 2-year up. Usually they take forever to do these large busts. But let's see. Does it actually? I don't think it's actually said it so far. Let's continue and I'll see if it says anything. Mm-hmm. In Europe, the operation encompassed 17 countries and notably Germany, the Netherlands, Australia, and Portugal, according to a press release. That Europol Europe's law enforcement agency released on Tuesday. A statement from the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation sheds additional light on the operation dubbed Saboteur. Saboteur, yeah. Preparations for the crackdown began in July of 2018. Okay, so 2018, yeah, a little while now. When 60 experts from 19 countries, Eurojust and what is Eurojust? I know Europol.
You know what this reminds me of? I'm guessing it's the European Justice people, like their equivalent of the Justice Department. But what it's reminding me of is, was it 1984 where the government agencies were named that way?
I don't know, but I thought that was
no. 1984 was like Ministry of Information, Ministry of that. But there's, I'll have to look into that.
Europol, I thought, was the one for Europe that was like the FBI, right? So what would be Eurojust? I mean, I don't understand.
I would imagine it would be the equivalent of the Justice Department, which is separate from the FBI, but contains it.
Yeah, okay.
But that's just a guess from looking at the text of it.
Yeah, weird. Looked for the illegal sale and signs of counterfeit goods and money, drug, cybercrime, document fraud, non-cash payment fraud, credit card fraud, trafficking in human beings, and trafficking in firearms and explosives. Using information gleaned from this effort, the police identified 247 high-value targets and developed intelligence packages that were disseminated to the concerned countries for further handling. Hundreds of investigations are now underway. It's interesting that they only got 60 people out of, how many thousands of people, they probably would have gotten in a traditional setting. I mean, people are all freaking out, but it's probably not that big of a deal unless you're one of the, big drug dealers on, Dream Market here. This isn't
Dream Market. This was
they're not talking about Dream. They're just talking about Darknet. But it's this this might be the Dream Market mostly. I mean,
it started out saying that the announcement of one of the sites going down occurred on the same day as the 61 arrests. So I have to wonder if there's a connection there.
Yeah, I don't know.
Was Europol, for example, possibly operating that site?
I'm a little skeptical of that because usually they'll shut the site down prior to making any kind of announcements. Why would they keep it operating for a month? It doesn't make any sense to me.
I don't have any idea why they would do that unless they were I don't know.
I think what happened is they actually were not able to crack they weren't able to hack into the site. Like they failed in that aspect, I bet. And now Dream Market operators still kind of freaked out, and because all of their, I don't know how many. I'm sure there's lots of
maybe they just shut down because they read about the arrest.
Right,
that makes sense.
Right, exactly. They're like, it's getting too hot for us. We're gonna get out while getting out is good, and they weren't really identified. They weren't shut down, the main operators of Dream Market, but they're like, I think it's getting too hot for us. We're getting out. Yeah. I think that's what happened.
And kudos to the Dream Market guys for not falling for the temptation to exit scam.
Right. Exactly. So this actually sounds like a good thing, like a good situation. I don't know. I certainly it does. I think it says something about the fact that we actually had an operation that ran from the beginning to the end and was not shut down. But I don't know. That's me. It says Tor actually does work. It works pretty well actually, and it doesn't mean that you can't be stupid about it, right? If you're stupid about it, you're going to get caught, as the 60 people who were caught evidences. But if you're not stupid about it and you know what you're doing and you take all the right precautions, which appears to be what happened with Dream Market, and it's not the only site that's been in operation since 2013 that hasn't been shut down. Even when they did the last raid in 2013 or something like that, maybe it was 2000. I think it was 2013 Silk Road 2. Well, basically there were still other marketplaces that did not get shut down, which suggests that they still, even at that time, were not actually capable of cracking Tor in any real way. They were only able to exploit some of the dark web sites. And not only that, but even amongst other types of sites that were not affiliated with drugs, they also failed to shut those down. So yeah, I mean, they really have been totally ineffective, if you ask me, at shutting down the dark web just as in general. They can go after select individuals who are lax when it comes to security, but as far as a tool, it actually has worked better, surprisingly good, considering that Tor onion sites have never been as secure as using Tor from a user perspective has been at protecting Tor users, if that makes any sense. So in other words, it's easier to identify the Tor servers, okay, Tor onion sites, than it is to identify the users accessing those Tor onion sites, unless the Tor users are providing, say, private information over those sites.
Right.
So simply accessing them does not give the FBI or whoever breaks into these sites any information. But if you, say, give a drug dealer or whatever, or if you publish your address on the website, right? Obviously, if the site gets cracked, they're going to know where you are. Right, exactly. So, yeah.
If you tell them, they will know.
Right. And I think there are actually, from what I understand, I don't know if I was talking to you about this, Rich, or if it was somebody else, but apparently there are systems now, or better systems. So I guess basically when they're no longer storing your money or your address on these dark markets themselves. Now, that might not be the case for Dream Market, from what I understand, but other marketplaces that have been developed, they don't store that information. So even if the marketplace gets shut down, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have your address to try and go after you. Not that they're going after the users anyway. They're just going after the drug dealers, basically.
And when you send your address, you normally PGP encrypt it anyway.
Right.
So they'd have to get into that. Of course, if they've caught the site operator, it's a toss-up.
Now, my understanding is that wasn't always the case, though. And that's been something that's been a development over the years as, sites have been shut down, basically.
Well, I think it was that way on the Silk Road.
The original Silk Road or Silk Road 2? Or
I think Silk Road 1 even, they did use
did they? Okay.
PGP encrypted addresses. But, of course, there's no one to make you PGP encrypt the file before you send it. So, if you don't do it, they're going to have your address in clear text.
Yeah, and there is a certain amount of faith. I mean, obviously, if they bust a drug dealer who's been sloppy about his security habits, and he still has all of those messages that were sent.
Right. I mean, once you've sent a shipment out, there's no reason to hold that address. Throw it in the fire, boys.
Yeah, hopefully they're not holding on to this information, but there is a certain amount of trust involved here. No matter what in this type of case. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Europol also used the announcements to warn the general public about risks stemming from shopping on the internet's hidden recesses.
Quick, somebody panic.
I know. The only reason this is a danger is because of government, and it's not even that much of a danger.
Yeah. Let me read the statement, because it really is ironic. The dark web is not as dark as you think. When you buy or sell illegal goods online, you are not hidden from law enforcement. You are putting yourself in danger. So they're actually admitting that law enforcement is a danger to you. So good for that. The proper solution, of course, is repeal your stupid laws.
Yeah, they're actually creating a danger for users, because basically what they're doing is they're preventing systems from, let's put it this way. They're not effective at doing this, but they are attempting to do this. They're basically attempting to put users in danger by depriving them of the tools to determine whether or not the drugs that they are buying or who they are buying from are safe, more or less safe. Okay. And by more or less safe, I don't mean that the people buying them are not necessarily going to be harmed, but that they are getting what they actually intended to buy. So the quantities and the dosages are actually accurate, for example, or the drugs that they buy are actually the drugs that they were advertised, so that they don't overdose and things of that nature.
Yeah, they don't overdose or just get the wrong drug, which
Right.
also happens. I've read of cocaine with fentanyl in it. Now, there's no rational reason to put fentanyl in cocaine, because cocaine is an upper and fentanyl is a downer. So it doesn't make people think your cocaine is better to put fentanyl in it. I don't know why they would actually do it unless they were just trying to kill people. I've always thought that the fentanyl thing was coming from the government.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, my understanding of fentanyl is that it is basically, it's really, really, what's the word I'm looking for?
Potent?
Yeah, I'm potent. Not quite the word I'm looking for, but yeah, potent basically. And the reason that is because it's concentrated, I think, and they can ship it easier than if it's a more bulkier product, and that's easier to detect.
Well, that makes sense.
But it's so potent that you need like scientific equipment that is just not readily available in order to create accurate dosages when you go to ship the ultimate product.
Right. So instead, you mix it up with a powder until you've got enough to measure and hope that your mix is really creamy.
Right, but it's not. So the government's actually created a more deadly situation.
And that's been true since the beginning of Prohibition. Even if you look at alcohol prohibition, distilled liquors weren't that popular in the United States at the beginning of Prohibition. Distilled liquors became popular in the United States when the government cracked down and it was easier to hide the distilled liquor. So that's a pattern that we've seen over and over again, is that the police decide to outlaw something and people end up responding to that by doing something more dangerous.
Yeah. It's a crazy situation.
Don't blame me. I voted Libertarian.
Yeah, me too. Don't tell anybody.
You voted?
Yes, I did. I do
Good
actually vote. Yeah, I don't know if it does any good, but yeah.
I figure it can't hurt.
Yeah, I mean,
I vote Libertarian, and at least if you look at the totals, you'll know that there was one more guy who wants more liberty.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's more of a message than it is anything else, and I think it's in time there's the opportunity to influence, and I think influencing in just voting is also useful, because it says, at least in New Hampshire, because it says that there are people coming here for the purpose of change, and that doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen given enough time, and it's already been shown to be effective. There's even when you're going backward, it's still effective in the sense that because you have more people, there is more that can be accomplished, even if you're still going backward in a sense.
Right. Well, you're not going to stop the back and forth. You're just going to be able to, slow down the back and speed up the forth, or vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, there's some things that will be really awesome that you could achieve, like cryptocurrency. We got an awesome law passed in New Hampshire with cryptocurrency, where they basically removed the authority of the banking department to regulate cryptocurrency in New Hampshire. Or there was I'm trying to think, there was a law apparently that got passed that removed. So basically, like, there was a Supreme Court ruling that allows the government to enter your home without a warrant, and New Hampshire passed a law that basically says, no, you can't punish somebody for refusing entrance I'm trying to think of the word I'm looking for, like a tax assessor, for example. You can refuse them entry, and a couple of years ago they could punish you for that by assessing your shack at $1 million. Well, they can't do that in New Hampshire anymore, and the only reason they were allowed to do that in the first place was because of a really terrible U.S. Supreme Court ruling. So, it does help. And that a lot of those laws were actually the result of libertarians moving to New Hampshire.
If you've never thrown a tax assessor off a piece of property and you're a libertarian, that is an experience not to be missed. Definitely come to New Hampshire and just tell a tax assessor to piss off. It's fun to do. I've done it.
Yeah, I haven't actually seen anybody tell a tax assessor to piss off, but I have seen a what are the people that go around statistics gathering census people?
Oh, census
Yeah.
people? Oh yeah, they're fun.
Yeah, I've seen some really there's some great videos on YouTube actually, and I think they were in Keene even actually. So
They got me in Florida. I got the long form census, and so I took a big red magic marker and I wrote a 3 on the census form, and I sent it back to them because that's how many people were living in the house, and that's all they're authorized to ask me. So they sent out this little Oriental census taker, and I mentioned that she's Far Eastern because it plays into the story, and she's coming out, and she says she's from the census, and I say, oh yeah, well, I already sent in my census. There's 3 people living here, and actually, even that was a lie because I counted the dog. But that,
that's great.
but so she says, well, we still need some more information, information from it. And I said, well, you're not going to get it. And she said, well, I'm just going to ask you the questions. And so she asked me a question. I say 3. She asked me another question. I say 3. Finally, she's just looking at me like I'm crazy. And I'm like, look, you can send guys out here to pull out my fingernails, and I'll still only say 3. It will just be louder and shriller. And she said, well, they're not going to use this information for anything untoward. And I said, did you know that your people were rounded up during World War II and sent into concentration camps? And she said, well, yeah, they don't do that. I said, where do you think they got the data on where the Japanese people were?
Yes, this is very
They
true.
got it from the census.
And that's a fact. And it's like it's an open fact. It's not like a secret.
This is not a conspiracy theory.
Right? Yeah, it's not some libertarian, conspiracy. It's something that actually happened in the United States during World War II, and that's exactly where they got the information from. And that was illegal. It was actually illegal for them to do that, from what I understand, but they did it anyway.
Well, the Trail of Tears was illegal, and Andrew Jackson said, well, tell the Chief Justice to raise an army and stop me.
Yeah, exactly. You can't trust government, and you shouldn't trust government. Even if you can trust government, you shouldn't.
Yeah.
It's just a terrible. You'll learn the hard way.
Bad plan.
I mean, you're gonna learn the hard way probably at some point. So let's see here. Yeah, we kind of already did that already. Let's see. Australia threatens social media laws that could jail tech executives, and I just think this is hilarious. I mean, look,
I would love to see the Zuck in jail. I would. I gotta say, even if it's unjust, I'd love to see him jailed.
The story is from CNET. Australia is this tiny little country in the middle of nowhere. If you really start to first of all, these people aren't even in Australia, but let's say they decide to visit Australia. If you actually start jailing them, they're not going to have operations there anymore. They're just going to leave. Your market is too freaking small for a company to care about. Europe, the European Union might be able to do that. You cannot. It just doesn't work that way. Following the live-streamed New Zealand mosque shooting that left 50 dead in Christchurch, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison is looking to crack down on extremist content on social media. And unfortunately, Facebook, we already had a story about Facebook has started doing that. And this is a danger, because what is a terrorist today might be you tomorrow. And we already know that's how they define terrorists basically already. So,
well, I've already been arrested by the FBI Joint Terrorist Task Force, so I guess I'm ahead of you.
Yeah. Do you want to give our listeners a little synopsis of the story with that?
Oh yeah, okay. So,
we're
still doing my backstory.
Don't get me wrong,
here.
but you don't come off as a terrorist to me.
Well, you've never really irritated me, but a few years ago in 2014, I was arrested by the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force, and I was arrested technically by the Keene Police Department, but they brought me into the police station, and it turned out that the FBI was sitting there waiting for me. And they were looking to have me entrap Ian Freeman from Free Talk Live. And the long and short of it is I refused to do that for them, and they put me on trial. They'd threatened me with 86 or 96 years in jail, and they put me on trial, and I wouldn't lie to them. I refused to plea, and I told them that, yes, I sold that weed and you shouldn't convict me. Here's why. Unfortunately, I didn't win that trial, and I ended up spending a year in jail. But yes, the government will definitely treat you like a terrorist if it's convenient for them, because the government is infinitely corrupt.
Yeah, and people have to remember that what they're doing is they're looking for particular activists, and Ian Freeman is an activist, and it's not the only time he's been targeted. He's been targeted numerous times. There have been a number of raids over the years. They couldn't get him on drugs, so they accuse him of. Well, they didn't even accuse him directly. They indirectly implied, because there's no evidence whatsoever. They bring up sex crimes usually, and in this case, they were implying child porn was accessed here recently. They thought they
raided the house for that 2 years ago. They still haven't managed to find anything on any of those hard drives.
Because there wasn't anything.
Yeah, of course there
was no evidence of anything.
But what there was in that house, and I think this might be how they ended up there, was a Tor exit node.
Was there a Tor exit node?
There was a Tor exit node. And so I'm wondering whether that was what happened. Did somebody access the playpen through that building?
That doesn't make any sense, because that's not how the exploit works. The way the exploit works is it executes on a machine, on the machine itself, and bypasses the Tor network in order to get the IP address of that machine. So that's just not. Yeah, that's not what happened. But,
okay, possibly not then.
Yeah,
I always thought it might be, just because it's
I think what happened is a
coincidence.
Here's what I think happened. I think an FBI agent actually lied, because 2 weeks prior, exactly 2 weeks prior to the raid, Mark Freeman actually came on Free Talk Live and called out the FBI for being hypocrites in the Playpen case. He said,
so they could have just slipped that IP address into the list and then done that raid immediately for revenge.
It was basically what they were trying to do. Is I think they realized that they weren't going to find any evidence. I think they knew that before they went in, but they were trying to undermine him, undermine Free Talk Live and Ian Freeman, because he was an activist and the show was criticizing the FBI.
And that was actually successful, because I think that was a big thing that led to Ian being banned from things like PorkFest.
I think it was somewhat successful, but I think it was also a failure, because most of the radio stations that Free Talk Live airs on retained Free Talk Live, and there were only like maybe 7 or 8 of them, I think, that actually that were lost. And there's more stations today, a couple years later, than there were during the time of the raid.
I think several of the raids, the lost stations came back too.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I think ultimately they were totally ineffective. For any to any real degree. I don't think the movement's any smaller today than it was, then. It's only grown since then. We've got more people. A few people have left, but that's going to happen with any movement. And there's more decentralization today than there was a couple years ago.
Well, I think that's one thing they did succeed in. One of the reasons we're more decentralized today, I think, is, it used to be that Keeniacs would go out every week to the parties in Manchester or every month and that kind of thing. And so there's a little bit more separation, I think, between the Keeniacs and the Manchkins, because not all the Manchkins realize now that that it was a frame job. And some bad blood developed during that time.
I honestly, I think the majority of people do not care and don't necessarily believe what happened. I think I think it's more along those lines, and there's a handful of people who have an issue with Ian and certain activities that have gone on in Keene in the past. And that is sort of, they've used that as a means of basically attacking Ian and Free Talk Live and Keene.
That's
in
true. A
general.
lot of political attacks
That's
are
political infighting,
disingenuous.
and that was long before the raid ever happened. So
Yes, there's always been infighting.
yeah. And that's going to happen as soon as you get any group of people together. You get more than 10 people together, and you're going to have that sort of thing happening. That's just a reality. It happens in the free software community. It happens in the libertarian activist community. It happens in every single other community that you can possibly come up with.
True.
So yeah, I actually think so. In a sense, I actually think it was a good thing that raid happened, because it did create it. We have Fork Fest as a result, and not just Pork Fest.
True.
We have,
And Fork Fest is a blast.
right. I mean, we already have a lot of decentralization in New Hampshire, I would say. But like even in Keene, we've got like 4 or 5 different groups that meet up regularly, and not everybody goes to the same groups. So to the same meetups. I mean, there's different groups of people because certain people just don't get along. And that's not a bad thing. It just it means that you have you can't just attack one group. Now all of a sudden you have to attack a different group. You have to attack multiple different groups.
And that's kind of what I expect from the Free State Project, is we're not going to end up being a tribe. We're going to end up being an alliance of tribes.
Yeah.
And like you say, that's good, and it means we don't have to agree on everything.
No, it doesn't. But by being in New Hampshire, it does still give us the opportunity to come together on issues, and that I think is very important.
Absolutely.
If you know what we didn't have a couple years ago that I am learning today we do have is a group in the north that's actually becoming more organized. Like there used to be a few people in the north, but apparently there's actually a sizable group of people nowadays.
Now, when you say the north, are you saying Grafton or
Northern
north
New
of
Hampshire.
Grafton?
I'm not sure exactly. Northern New Hampshire though, generally.
Okay.
Okay.
So like up by Rogers?
Yeah, like up by
Okay.
Rogers.
Yeah, that's
that
way
area.
north of Grafton.
Okay. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, and it's interesting because it's like a place that, in years gone by, it's like people moved there and you never heard from them, and they failed. But today there's actually a growing group of people. They actually have events, and you might, from what I've heard, there's more people showing up to some of these events than there are in Keene, which is really interesting because it tells you something about it's no longer, oh, move to New Hampshire, you have to move to southern New Hampshire because there's nobody living up north. There's already nobody living up north, period, to begin with, like even locals. Yeah. So the fact that there's now a lot of people up north as well as in the south, I think it's really telling.
Yeah, that definitely rocks. And of course, a lot of the early movers to the north even, they didn't necessarily fail. A lot of them, I think, just kept a low profile. Because you'd see them come through the Quill every once in a while. They'd come and go. But, it's like, a 4-hour drive. So maybe they'd come in once a month or something. But there were definitely, there were some people who I'm sure up there as well, I'm sure that failed and left. But.
So interestingly, my experience with people from the north was something to the effect of they don't even know each other. But this was a number of years ago. Apparently things are changing, and there's actually like people communicating, they're talking with each other. And there may be still people who don't really know each other up north, but the point is there are more people who know each other up north today. If you go up north today, there are people you can get in contact with and find out who else is in the area that, you can go to a potluck and basically meet other people, right? That didn't exist apparently a number of years ago.
Wow.
And there were people, and I talked to them, and I'd be like, oh, you live in such and such city, do you guys have a group or something up there? And they're like, and I'd be like, well, I know somebody else is in that city, and they'd end up getting together, and we'd be like at what was it, like a Liberty Forum, I think it was. And so this actually happened, and these two people living in the same city and they don't even know each other. And these cities in the north are not like cities anywhere else in the United States. We're talking about like towns, like small towns and villages, basically. So the fact that they didn't know each other was just mind-boggling.
I ran into a guy at the Keene Inn like 2 years ago, and he was like, "You're Rich Paul," and I was like, "Yes, you're not wrong." And I said, how do you know me? And it turned out the guy was a Free Stater who had moved like 3 years previously. He was living in Keene, and he just hadn't connected to the other Free Staters. And as far as I know, he still hasn't. He was just keeping a low profile, but he knew who I was, so I guess he was watching what we were doing, but he just,
I can't
maybe he
tell
was
you,
skittish. He
I
didn't
can't
want
tell
to come
you
around.
I can't tell you how many times I've heard that story. Not that
From
particular...
me? Do I keep repeating that one?
No.
Oh, okay, good,
No.
good.
I've heard that story, not from you, but just from different people in general and people I've bumped into, and I'm like, wait, you've been here for how many years? And I've never met you. And I've been here myself 3 years. So it's like, I've never met you in all 3 years that I've been here. And like, you just happen to pop your head out.
First time I came to Porkfest, I wouldn't even put my real name on the sign-in sheet because I was like, I don't know where this is going. I don't want the government to know I was here.
Yeah. It's a little hard though if you're an activist hiding your face.
After my first arrest, they were pretty certain of who I were because of who I was, because they weren't going to cut me loose until that happened.
Oh yeah, until they got your name. The police you're talking about, right?
Exactly. They had my name and my fingerprints.
Yeah, there was somebody that refused to give a name at some point. And
Sam Dodson.
They held him for a while. Eventually,
they held him in jail for over 3 weeks. He refused to give his name, and when they threw him out, they issued him bond without his asking for it, which they don't usually do, and he said, "I don't want bond. I want blah 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 blah." And they said, "Well, you have bond. You have to leave. We're throwing you out. Change your clothes." And he said, "I'm not going to change my clothes. I still want to talk to these people." So they threw him out of the jail in his orange jumpsuit. He got kicked out of jail. How do you do that? I was trying and I couldn't get him to kick me out. So
that's great.
Kudos to Sam Dodson. You rock, bro.
Yeah.
He also filmed the video footage of the original 420 rally, so I'll always have a soft spot in my heart.
One of the things that I encourage people to do is not provide a name when police demand your name or ID in New Hampshire, because you're not obligated to under the law, and there won't be a charge relating to that when they arrest you. They can arrest you to identify you, but they won't actually have a charge to charge you with. So they have to make something else up. Okay. And it's gonna be. I would recommend pulling out a camera and hopefully having somebody else with a camera around you before you get anywhere near a police officer. But and this is coming from experience. I was arrested and I refused to ID and everything else, and there was never a charge for refusing to ID, because it's not illegal in New Hampshire to refuse to ID or to provide your name or address or anything like that.
Yeah, they charged Dodson with refusal to process at one point, which is an obscure charge, but I think they dismissed it. I think it turned out to be crap. I didn't refuse
the process or anything like that. But basically, the reason I refused is I don't believe any police officer has any right to demand ID from an individual. It's basically their obligation to identify you. And they shouldn't be asking you for ID prior to an arrest anyway.
Yeah, usually
if they have no reason to arrest you, they shouldn't be asking for ID.
Yeah, if I'm going, I don't know, because if they question somebody, they want to know for sure who they're questioning, so that if they, have to come back and question that person again, they get the right person.
Right to ask
so
for
I
ID.
understand. I understand they're asking.
You have no obligation to give, and what's the distinction.
Usually, when I go to a protest, I don't even carry ID. I leave it in the car. I'll have no wallet, no ID. They have no way to identify me, and that's the way I like it.
I don't necessarily know I would go quite that far. I mean, I'm not necessarily looking to be held in a cage for 3 weeks, but
Right.
I
It
would
just
say
irritates them.
it irritates them for one, and you have no obligation. So why? Why would you cooperate? What they're trying to do in these circumstances is basically frame you for a crime that you didn't even commit most of the time. So if they're basically targeting you for being an activist or protesting something, cooperate? No, don't cooperate. Do everything you can not to cooperate, and then sue them after when they violate your rights, if you can, if you at all can.
You can do that if you have the luxury. If you just have to get out of the situation, is where the not having ID solution shines, because if they ask you to show your ID and you literally don't have it, they can't really fault you for not giving it to them, especially if they arrest you and search you and there's no wallet, you know?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and again, a lot of this is also kind of dependent on circumstances. I don't
Very dependent on
you
circumstances.
definitely should have, if you're going to be doing activism, you should definitely have cameras pointed at you anytime there's any kind of interaction with police, because police, they are dangerous. They are a threat. They have guns. I wouldn't personally, unless you're doing some sort of gun activism, and even then, I don't know if I'd want to go there, but carry a gun on you. I mean, like, that's asking for more trouble than I'm willing to get myself into. And I don't mean, when I say trouble, I mean death. I don't mean, being arrested.
Yeah. If you see the places where I was expecting to get arrested in the 420 footage video, you'll see me with an empty holster on my belt, so I could, symbolically say, yes, we're gun people, without my gun falling into the hands of the police department, which I didn't want.
Yeah, it's probably not a good idea for them to get your gun anyway. I don't know. I wonder if, you don't have to register your gun unless, in New Hampshire, it doesn't
in
have
New
to
Hampshire,
register,
you
right?
never have to register.
So,
a gun.
if they have your gun, I wonder if they ID it or anything, or if they record anything in relation to like anything.
I'm sure they record the serial number.
Yeah, which could be a concern later. So I wouldn't want them to have it or get it in the first place. So ideally, you probably don't want to be carrying it around if you think you might get arrested.
Yeah.
And if you are arrested with your gun,
although
you
it got
might
me
wanna get it
out
for
of
gun.
trouble once. I was walking across the Keentown Square one time, and I had a 357 on my hip, and I had a quarter pound of weed in a backpack over my shoulder. So they're going to arrest. Cop comes up and he says, "Oh, we've got a warrant for you." And I'm like, "Oh, that's not good." So I said, "Well, I'd really rather you not take my weapon into custody. So why don't I just put it off and put it in this backpack, and I'll call my friend to come get it." Yeah. So I called up my friend, and he came and got the backpack and got the gun out of there, but also got the quarter pound of weed out of there, which really made my day better than it would have been.
Yeah, you probably, on the
Made my year better
on the
than it would
downside
have
of
been.
that, you probably don't want to be carrying a gun and weed at the same time, because they will charge you, I think at the federal level, potentially, I guess that's if it would be like FBI, not necessarily state. But anyway.
Yeah. See, in those days, I carried every day, all the time, every place I went.
Yeah.
And to some extent, it was a defense, because they would think, yes, guys, this guy's not going to walk around doing this with a gun on his hip. You'd have to be crazy. And it's like, yeah, you don't know me very well, do you?
Yeah, it's certainly interesting. Oh, governments.
Yeah. Can't live with them. Can't cut them up and use them for bait.
So we got to Article 13, which is great. So torrentfreak.com, this is a story from Torrent Freak. EU Parliament adopts copyright directive, including Article 13. The European Parliament has adopted the new copyright directive. This includes the widely contested Article 13, which was renumbered to Article 17 in the final text. Very confusing. Pirate Party MEP Julia Rita sees it as a dark day for internet freedom, but many copyright holders are happy with the result. In 2016, the European Commission first announced its plans to modernize EU copyright law. doesn't sound like modernizing to me, but okay. Initially, the plans received little mainstream attention, but over the past year, that changed drastically. Article 13 and Article 11 of the Copyright Directive, which were renamed Article 17 and Article 15 in the final text, were highly contested. Opponents repeatedly warned that the former would lead to upload filters and censorship, and the later was framed as a link tax. Yeah, I mean, this literally is a link. Are you familiar with Article 13, Rich?
I'm not familiar with the details.
So Article 13 is, it's a set of legislation anyway. Basically, it would make companies who linked, like Google News, that link to articles, pay a tax to the entity in which they were linking to.
Wow.
It's absolutely insane.
Maybe I'll never link to a news source in Europe again.
Well, I don't.
We might have to just throw Europe off the internet.
We should, but no. I mean, here's the thing. Europe, you're not in Europe's jurisdiction, so I wouldn't be too concerned. But people who are in Europe's jurisdiction have something to fear, and they are, they're being, what's the word I'm looking for?
Fleeced.
They're being fleeced for sure, but no, they're basically creating an environment, and I'm terrible with words. They're creating an environment where they're saying one thing, and the only other thing they're hearing back is what they said. So,
Echo chamber.
Echo chamber. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, echo chamber. They're creating an echo chamber, and that's very dangerous. It's a very dangerous set of circumstances. And already, if you go to Europe, you'll find that you're only getting very localized news stories, because a lot of stories that are published in the United States and around the world are actually censoring Europeans, because the laws in Europe with the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, basically try to create liabilities for basically companies or websites everywhere. So what they're doing is they're simply blocking people from Europe so that they don't have any ties to Europe, so that the European doesn't have any kind of, justified jurisdiction.
That's actually a great idea. I mean, if the rest of the world boycotts European internet, then Europe won't be able to get away with these stupid laws anymore if they want to have an internet.
There's a lot of stupid people in Europe, just like there's a lot of stupid people in the United States.
It's true.
Rich, though, I don't know. I don't know, but I think they're going, they're going in a very dangerous direction, regardless.
Yeah. I don't know. Every time I see the yellow vests in Paris, though, it gives me a little bit of hope. Even though their politics aren't mine, they're actually kind of a mixture of different factions. But every time I see them, I mean, they're out there blowing up, fighting the cops. They're out there getting shot with tear gas rounds, and they're coming back again and again and again.
I kind of like, if they were, here's the problem. They're using violence to attempt to achieve an objective, rather than using violence as a means of self-defense. And that's where I am not a fan of the violence that I see in Europe.
Well, the thing is, if you're directing your violence against an organization which has been brutalizing you for centuries, and the French government's been around longer than ours, then I really don't have a problem with it. I mean, sometimes in order to get rid of a pest, you have to burn the house down. And if you burned Europe down, but in the process if you burned France down and got rid of the French government in the process, then France would end up a lot richer and a lot freer at the end of that.
Unfortunately, I don't feel like that's what's really happening. What I've seen is more along the lines of people using violence against, say, Uber drivers and demanding...
In Europe?
Yeah.
I haven't heard anything about that.
Okay, so yeah, this is one example. In Europe, I think it was the yellow vests. Did that come from the Uber stuff? I don't know. Maybe it may not.
No, the yellow vests started out protesting against carbon taxes.
Okay. Or no, it wasn't at oil prices. I think it was oil prices.
No, it's carbon tax. It was
carbon
definitely a
tax? Okay.
tax because that's what made me look at them the first time and go, "Oh, what are they
Oh,
about?"
carbon tax, but it had to do with their oil prices going up, right? As a result.
Well, the carbon tax is built into gasoline, right?
yeah, right. So it increases their costs of doing business.
Yeah, it was built in.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It was built
So-
into fuel costs.
Yeah. So, no, but for example, taxi drivers across Europe are boycotting Uber, and they were using violence in the process of basically the boycott. They were shutting roads down, and they were like burning cars. They were doing all sorts of really terrible things to basically their enemy in their attempt to get the government to stop people from other people from driving, basically, who were not licensed. So
Okay, I don't think that was the yellow vests.
no,
doesn't-
it wasn't the yellow vest.
Oh,
You're right,
okay.
You're right. It's the same group of people, I think, that started the yellow vest movement. But yeah, it's weird.
You mean
They're-
the same like individual
drivers.
humans?
well, no, the yellow vest movement had to do with the taxi drivers. The taxi drivers
No.
had to wear the yellow vests, I believe. Is that
No,
not
no.
correct?
The yellow vests are required by French law for every motorist. You have to keep that in your car in
What?
case of an emergency. So if you have to walk down the road at night, you have a nice shiny orange vest to put on or a yellow vest to put on. And that's
Oh.
why everybody in France
I
has one of these
misunderstood
things
this.
to wear as
So
a uniform.
I thought it was okay. So I misunderstood something a little bit about that. So what I thought was the situation was it was the taxi drivers had to have the yellow vests, and so it was the taxi drivers who started it. So I'm just mistaken about that, and it's all
Oh.
drivers who have to have a yellow vest. I did not.
Yeah, no,
That's
it's a different thing.
insane.
I would definitely watch some
That is
video
even more insane
from
than I
from
thought.
France. They are fighting the police in France.
Wow.
They're and it's not just the police are fighting them and they're bleeding. It's you'll see police moving forward, but then you'll see the people advancing
So-
against the police
so
sometimes as well.
It might still be the case that it was the taxi drivers that started the yellow vest movement, because I know they were complaining about the cost of gas going up and putting them out of business. So that might be where it still started.
They
even
may
though
have
it
inspired it, but the
ex-
yellow
it
vests come
expanded
from
way
all
beyond
walks
that.
of life.
Yeah, no question about that. I totally agree with you. And I know, but originally, I'm talking about originally, because originally it was a smaller group of people, and then it then expanded outward. So I might still be right. It's just I wasn't aware, where I was mistaken about who had to have a yellow vest.
Right.
So yeah, but yeah, it's crazy. Let's see. First up was a proposal to reject the entire copyright directive. This was rejected with 443 votes against and 181 in favor. This is what blows my mind. It's like there's a small minority of people who are in favor of this basically change in the law, and yet most of the representatives voted in favor of it and very few voted against it, or well, the other way around. But anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is that if we had true democracies, if we had true if voting worked, basically, that wouldn't be the case, right? This law should not have passed.
Well, I don't know that democracy is any solution to that, because in order to consider the possible effectiveness of
I don't know if democracy
you
is
have
a
to
good thing, right?
consider how stupid the average person is, and then realize that a full half of them are stupider than that.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
and those are the people that are going to be making all of your decisions.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong, man. Both of us have been to Concord more times than we probably can count. So yeah, I've listened to representatives get up and testify and talk about this stuff, and it's just mind-bogglingly insane. And these people are just ordinary people in New Hampshire. It's not like these are professional politicians for the most part. So like you hear, and they were voted on by other ordinary people. So you kind of get an idea just how dumb the general population really is, and incapable of like very basic concepts. They don't understand what it is they're voting for. There's no way that even somebody who does have a good grasp on some of the bills that come up, they still don't know, generally, it's hard to decipher what you're voting for. So but it's interesting because even the basic stuff, a lot of these, representatives don't understand the basic concepts, let alone are going to understand the law as it's written itself, or the bill that's being written.
They certainly don't understand the concept of inalienable rights.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy because in New Hampshire, it's much easier, I think, to understand. I've read quite a bit of New Hampshire legislation, and it's not anywhere near as complicated as the legislation proposed in most states, and at the national level. So if it's I'm not saying even when it's in pretty clear English that you're going to be able to fully understand it, simply because in most cases probably, the one thing you have to understand about the laws are that even if there's a law that says something, even if you have two states with the same exact law, word for word, there are going to be different court rulings, okay, that a result in different meanings to the very same piece of legislation passed in different states. So even if you think you know what the law says, it may not actually have the same interpretation in different states. So in one state, for example, it might be the law might sound like it's totally legal to cross the street, for example, and that might be the case in one state, but it might not be the case in the other state, even though it's the same exact wording.
Yeah. And of course, even in the same jurisdiction, you may just have different courts rule different ways. That happens especially in the federal courts. You'll have the circuit court, and I think it's the Ninth Circuit in California will rule one way, and the Virginia Circuit will rule a different way, and then the Supreme Court has to decide between the two of them. Or you get left not knowing what the law is.
Yeah, but for years and years and years, there's still usually a gap, a very long period of time in which different parts of the country have different interpretations of the law. So the law is the same as it's written, but the interpretation is different. So in one part of the country, even though you've got the same law, because it's interpreted differently, you may not be able to do the thing that you want to do, but in another part of the country you can.
One reason that the so-called rule of law as opposed to the rule of men is a pipe dream, because if you write the same program and it doesn't run the same on different platforms, then how can you say that the program is controlling the machine? There's more than that going on.
Yeah. Let's see. Is there anything else in this? So I actually have a really interesting video that I think I want to play, and I'm actually thinking maybe we'll end this show with the video because it's a great video. Yeah, let's do that. We've almost gone on 3 hours here, so it's probably a good time to end the show. So here we go. And before I go, I didn't even mention the phone number. So this is a live show on Saturdays from 5 to 7, maybe 8 sometimes, Eastern. So if you do want to call in, the number is 1-866-703-2989. Not this Saturday. The show is over now. But next Saturday, you can. The phone number is also on the website. So go to freedomdecrypted.com, and that is where you can also watch and listen to the show live. So here we go.
It's difficult to picture some enemies unless we give them an identity. The newest entity we've got to fight is Article 13. I call it robot copyright. I've been doing music on the net for 2 flipping decades, even before YouTube on the GeoCities webpage. And every time I see the regulations get changed, it's harder for creators to make it to get some end range. Look at my track record, I put a lot of time into coming up with tracks, records, and dropping rhymes on the fight to democratize copyright, to shine a spotlight on anonymous and occupied. I took a bit of time off to rap about games, but now I'm back and I'm backing out the game, passing out castigations and patting down your claim. No matter how you obfuscate your rationale's insane. Maybe you'll get the picture when I smack you out the frame, cause I don't wanna see the internet blacking out for shame. But that's what's happening now, yet again. A threatening mechanism checking on everything you say. All hail robo copyright. is a nightmare condition of a quite rare position where we can't upload any kind of copyrighted clip without their permission. Now it seems pretty good if you just look at the surface, but deep under the hood the engine isn't fit for purpose. And if we still don't trust AI and Teslas yet, then pray why would we let it suppress the net? Unless we forget sober and act in the Digital Economy Act, and every tactic the copyright lobbyists lobby this hobbyists, the obfuscating confidence tricks are pretty obvious. They make it sound like it's benefiting small creators to make them more successful evermore for all the ages. But look at labels and the way they've always treated artists. If you can't see they won't change, you need new glasses. It isn't about creative control now, it's about controlling creatives for cold cash. They want money for old rope, it's old hat, it's an old trope, anybody could have told that. We're surrounded by constant IP, imagine real life with content ID. A conglomerate deciding what your eyes see. When there's nothing else left, they'll copyright me. Freedom! Why bother with a doctor? You've got a faith healer. Freedom! Acting like a god, but you're a lay preacher. Hey Jesus, save me, cause I don't need a gatekeeper. Freedom! Till I'm at the heavenly gates and meeting Saint Peter. All hail Robo-Copyright, our great leader. You're never gonna drain the swamp if you wade deeper. All hail Robo-Copyright, our great leader. All hail Robo-Copyright, our great leader. Do you trust the judgment of an algorithm to look at everything you touch and make a sound decision? The value of satire or parody and tell the difference, all controlled by copyright trolls. We know they're well malicious, they're already tough enough to make a parody. Some of us have given up because of copyright brutality. Cash grabbing companies take money for morality, knowing full well they're falsifying the legality. As if it wasn't bad enough already with net neutrality, they've done it again, it's a definition of insanity. How can we trust a robot to know what's permissible, that only sees the content but content's invisible? It's risible, divisible, befitting of our ridicule. At least it would if the reality wasn't so miserable. Every single picture you submit will be conditional. Article 11's even restricting what is clickable. It's vulnerable to abuse, commercial and political, like unelected politicians slipping us rohypnol. So if you all care about it, make people aware about it. Get on the phone, get on the web, get on the air and shout it. All hail Robo-Copyright, our great leader. Cutting off the trailers so you can't see the main feature. All hail Robo-Copyright, our great leader. All hail Robo-Copyright, our great leader. It's difficult to picture some enemies unless we give them an identity. The newest entity we've got to fight is Article 13, I call it Robo-Copyright. It's difficult to picture some enemies unless we give them an identity. The newest entity we've got to fight is Article 13, I call it Robo-Copyright.
All hail Robo-Copyright! All hail Robo-Copyright!